in
Right.
blood of in many of us,
We
because
still live with the idea which Romans gave us, right? That idea that word to word translations will create problems, and we should translate the spirit rather than the letter.
The letter,
And Romans often focused on translation of Bible
Bible.
from Greek into Latin, and they also focused on translating Greek classics. So Roman culture enriched itself by translating a lot of material from Greek and Hebrew. So translation became a very important activity for them. So the earliest thinking about translation, and which is the most enduring, in the sense that we today also use the same idea when we sit down to translate one thing, that word to word translations are not going to work.
True.
Right. So, and what has happened is we have not gone beyond this idea.
Beyond these ideas.
And only recently, as back as in 1970s, that we were actually able to break through this paradigm. So let's look at other very lasting old ideas of translation, very common ideas about translation, which are part of the traditional paradigm of translation. So let's have a look at the next slide.
Yeah, you might have heard various ideas about translations, like poetry is what is lost in translation, and that is famous quote, famous belief that Robert Frost has given to us. Or translation is like woman: if she is beautiful, she is not faithful, or if she is faithful, she is not beautiful. I think we need a bit of discussion here,
Yeah.
because that's very narrow and very rigid understanding of translation.
In fact, Michelle, we'll look at what feminists have to say about this idea
Exactly.
towards the end of it. But this is a very deep rooted idea that translation is like woman: if she is beautiful, she is not faithful, and if she is faithful, she is not beautiful. This is a very widespread idea. And feminists have looked at this as a very sexist belief, and we'll look at what feminists have to say. But what we have to keep in mind right now is that this is very conventional and very widespread notion.
Yes, and here comes one of the very interesting but very famous misbelief about translation, and that is translation always involves loss, and it is always approximate.
Right. Right.
So I mean, in that sense, we are looking at translation in terms of only in relation to the source language and culture, rather than the target language and culture.
Exactly. And many people complain that translation always involves loss. Now, this is very widespread. You might have heard your teachers say this. You might have even said it yourself as student. But what you forget is that when you read a book from Scandinavian language translated into Gujarati, there is no loss actually involved. What you have is actually a gain. Otherwise, you would not have read that book. So all translation activity, if it is seen from a particular angle, you might think that there is a loss there. But if you look from the point of view of reader, then there is always a gain
Exactly.
in translation. Even if it is a bad translation, you gain something when I can read, say for example, Malayalam poem in Gujarati. I am gaining a poem in Gujarati. It's no loss. So, but widespread belief is translation always involves a loss.
Exactly. I think one of the possible reasons of this kind of misbelief is the habit of value judgment.
Right.
But there is so much of value judgment involved that we straight away jump to conclusion, being the speaker of that source language, that this is not a proper translation. This is just an approximate version. Okay. So this narrow understanding should be removed, or I think contemporary translation theories helps us.
Right.
They help us in enriching, or actually
It helps us to go beyond this.
Go beyond,
idea
exactly, go
That
beyond.
translation is always about loss and approximation. It helps us to go beyond because it helps us to look at translation from other angles. Right. So that is what we are keeping in mind. So let's look at some other
Yeah.
beliefs.
And people may say that never translate word for word, or never translate literally. Translation should be faithful to the spirit rather than the letter of the original. That just what we discussed. And this conventional thinking about translation is older than Roman thinkers like Cicero or Horace. I think so. We actually we should translate that time. We should come out of that time framework and at least be modern in that sense.
Exactly. So what we are discussing today is modern translation theory as against traditional one, and the ideas of Horace and Cicero are very influential in Bible translating. Now, Bible translating was a big industry in the West
Exactly.
because Christianity is spread by translation. That is something that you have to keep in mind, that you cannot spread Christianity without translating. So translating is something which is fundamental to promotion of Christianity.
Yes.
And that's why people have spent a lot of time thinking about translation in the West, because you cannot actually convert people into Christianity without converting Bible into that language.
Into that language.
So you cannot convert people of particular community until you convert your own English Bible into the Bible of that language.
Exactly. So I mean, here comes a very interesting area for research also. The
Exactly.
role of translation into these missionary activities. For
Exactly.
example, recently we came through this Bible's translation into tribal languages.
Right.
I think that's very
Right.
interesting.
Very interesting. Means a good amount of work has been done, and some of the theorists, linguists like Eugene Nida, have done great amount of work on Bible translation. So this is a very exciting area of research. But what we are discussing now is many of our ideas about translation have come from this conventional practice oriented view of translation.
Exactly.
So let's look at let's go further in our discussion.
Yeah.
Let us compare this traditional paradigm with the new one.
With the new one.
yeah.
Yeah. The traditional thinking about translation is invariably dualistic, normative, and hierarchic. That is to say, it invariably compares the translation with original, and it invariably sees the translation as inferior and secondary to the original. And that is something serious to be discussed here, because
Yeah.
we need to look at this hierarchy relationship.
Exactly.
Because many time, or not many time, almost we say that translation is always secondary, informer, less, or it is twice removed from the original.
Right. Right. So this hierarchy between original and translation is similar to caste system in India, where the original is something like Brahman and translation is something like Shudra. So this hierarchic thinking about translation is one of the most important features of traditional thinking about
Exactly.
translation. So whenever you come across, say for example, translation of Uma Shankar Joshi's poem into English, then you invariably compare it with the original and see that translation mein ye nahi aaya.
Yeah.
Right, this is missing,
This is missing.
and that's why it's inferior. So this is a very important response to translation,
Exactly.
and that is one of the key features of translation studies. So what we mean by dualistic is that you always compare original with translation and show how translation is inferior, and that is habitual.
Exactly.
Right, and that is maximum that we can do when it comes to criticism of translation. We usually find faults with translation. Translation can be easily faulted, while original is about blemishes and faults. So this is the dualistic hierarchic notion of translation that we are discussing here. So let's look at this slide and let's look into it further. And what I mean by normative, as you rightly pointed about judgment and evaluation,
Exactly.
right? So we are very hasty in judging translation,
Judging translation.
right? And we are very judgmental about it.
So the modern theories of translation, they actually question this whole idea of translator being lesser to writer, and the whole question of authenticity. You know,
Right.
we are always after authenticity. This is not authentic translation.
Right.
So I mean, in that sense, it can be normative.
Exactly.
It considers the translation from the point of view of source text, language, and so culture. I mean, not the target language
correct.
and culture. And it is primarily focused on the practice of translating.
Right. So these are the features of traditional thinking about translation that is very popular among students as well as teachers in India. But these are the three main features. One is that you run down translation, find fault with it. Secondly, there is a hierarchy. Thirdly, your judgment about translation comes from source language point of view. Means a person who judges translation is a person who is not the intended reader of translation. So when a Gujarati knowing person judges translation of, say for example, a Gujarati poet like Ravji Patel, he is not supposed to be the one who is reading translation. He knows Gujarati. Why should he read translation? Right? But translation is meant for a person who doesn't know Gujarati. And this is what we precisely forget. Translation is meant for a person who does not have access to that language. So a Bengali reader will evaluate that translation in a different way than the person who knows Gujarati does. So this is what we usually forget.
Yes.
And if you look at the third feature mentioned in the slide, that is always focus on practice of translation.
Practice of
કેવી રીતે
translation.
કરવું?
Exactly.
How to do it. It is not possible.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that is all that we have to offer about translation in a traditional paradigm.
Traditional paradigm, yes.
So if you have to go beyond it, let's see how we can go beyond this paradigm.
Now, contemporary translation studies tell us, I mean, it is the discipline of translation studies is very recent. In the sense, in 1978,
Yeah.
André Lefebvre proposed that name translation studies be adapted for the discipline that concerns itself with the problems raised by the production and description of translations. This is something we are trying to do now onwards.
Exactly. Right, and 1978 is a very recent date in intellectual history of the whole world. If Horace and Cicero were 2000 years back, now this is not even 40 years.
Yes.
Right, so translation studies is a very young discipline which has not even entered its middle age.
Middle age, yes.
Right, it has recently started becoming middle age, but compared to the elders, it's still very young.
Very young.
Let's look at what are the main features of this thing.
Yeah. Until then, most of the thinking about translation was focused on the practice of translating, like what is the best way to translate, what is a good translation, is translation possible. So this is the shift from these conventional notions.
Exactly.
Yeah. The theoretical preoccupation with larger questions like what is relationship between translation and society, what role does translation play in literary history, how does dominant ideological outlook of the society and the translation affect translation activity, and how does translation affect ideological currents in the society, are fairly recent.
Right, these preoccupation, these questions are very recent. And what do you mean by dominant outlook of society and translator? One good example would be Edward Fitzgerald's translation of Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam.
Khayyam.
And the translation was done in quatrains, English quatrains, and it became immensely popular that all of us today think that Omar Khayyam is Fitzgerald's Omar Khayyam. But Fitzgerald was a Victorian translator and he was living at the height of imperialism, and his outlook to the translation and to Omar Khayyam was that I am going to improve Omar Khayyam. And there are certain things which are worth censoring in Omar Khayyam, and I am going to convert it into Victorian text. So what he did was he made Omar Khayyam, a Persian poet, into English Victorian poet, like Arnold or like Tennyson. Right, so what he was doing, he was actually converting and transforming an older poet with a very different civilizational background like Omar Khayyam into a British middle class and pro-imperialistic writer. So that is what we mean when we say that dominant ideology affects translation. But the translations were so popular that even today in India we feel that we are reading Omar Khayyam while we are in fact reading a Victorian poet named Fitzgerald.
Fitzgerald, yes. And one of the interesting questions that comes to my mind right now is that what is the relationship between translated literature and the existing literature, I mean the canon.
Right.
For example, earlier if you see literature of syllabus of Gujarati literature BA, you may not find many Western texts.
Okay.
But now they have started including those texts into translation.
Right.
So that is one of the functions that it actually modifies the existing canon.
Exactly. It opens up the canon. That's a very important view, Vishal, because we are used to thinking about literature in a canonical way. While in actuality it doesn't happen. For example, you mentioned Gujarati and I am reminded of Visa Khandekar. He was so widely translated into Gujarati that people even suspected that Visa Khandekar is a Gujarati novelist.
Exactly.
Right. So what happens is that translation have always impacted literary tradition, but academic canons are not open to the idea of translation.
So in that sense, it is not just a domestic inscription, but it's a cross-cultural communication.
Right.
Because there has been a tradition between Bengali and Gujarati culture.
Exactly.
They have been translating reciprocal.
Exactly.
So, so entire Tagore, entire Sharad Babu they are available in Gujarati translation.
Right. To a point at which we feel that Sharad Babu is actually a Gujarati novelist.
Exactly.
Right? Or Khandekar is a Gujarati novelist. That's the kind of impression that was created because of the popularity of these people. In fact, Sharad Chandra was translated into almost all major languages of India without help of Sahitya Academy.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the popularity of the novelist. And as students of translations, we are interested in these kind of questions today. The ideological and literary history. So, what is the impact of Visa Khandekar, Sharad Babu, and Tagore on the Gujarati literature? Is a question that we would like to ask today instead of asking how to translate.
Yes, and on Gujarati readership.
On readership, exactly. On the formation of sensibility of Gujarati readership.
And considering the Gujarati concept of aesthetics, how did it affect?
Right. Exactly. So we are asking a different set of questions to translation. And these set of questions are fairly recent is the point that we are making in this slide.
Another question, I mean, the other side of the coin is how translation is affected by ideological frameworks.
Exactly.
For example, there are so many translations available of Gandhi's writing. So I think who translate becomes a very crucial question.
Very, very true. For example, Mahadev Bhai translated many of Gandhiji's work. What would happen if an American person or a Britisher translated Gandhiji? So what sort of translation would that be?
Exactly.
Is a question that we can ask ourselves. What if a German translator translated from Gujarati?
Yes.
Right? What kind of translations would they be? So translation, when we are looking at it from a different point of view, becomes a very fascinating and very important cultural activity.
Cultural activity, yes.
Let's go further in our discussion.
Contemporary translation studies often focuses on the function and role of translation in the target language and culture. That's what we just discussed.
Yeah, exactly.
And the role of target language and culture in the process of translation.
Right.
So actually, as we have been discussing, that it is the target language and culture that actually governs the process of translation.
Exactly. And it starts from right from the choice of the
Text.
text to the